There are reports that hundreds of people have died and have been injured over the last 3 days.
And to Tanzania, where authorities have imposed curfews and an internet blackout as post-election protests sweep the country.
Okay, why was the internet shut down?
The internet, because internet, when we tried to open also, it created a havoc among small groups of vandalists.
Tanzania's silent crisis. The election, the world ignored. What you're about to hear could change everything you thought you knew about Tanzania, and about how fragile democracy can truly be on the African continent. Because right now, one of Africa's calmest nations is standing in the middle of a quiet storm, a political crisis unfolding far from global headlines, far from breaking news, and far from the world's attention. This is a story that few are telling. A story that begins on October 29th, 2025, the day Tanzania went to the polls. It should have been a day of hope, a day when citizens shaped their own future through the power of the ballot. But instead, it became the beginning of a national nightmare. When the official results were announced, the ruling president, Samia Suluhu Hassan, was declared the winner with an unbelievable 98% of the vote. A number so high it stops feeling like democracy and starts feeling like control. Even the most admired leaders in history rarely reach 80% in free elections. 98 means something else entirely. It means the competition never really stood a chance. And Tanzanians knew it. Within hours, protests erupted across the country, from Dar es Salaam to Mwanza. People poured into the streets demanding the truth, demanding fairness, demanding their voices be heard. But instead of answers, they were met with bullets and batons. Opposition party Chadema claimed that up to 700 people were killed in the chaos that followed. 700 lives lost. Not soldiers, not rebels, ordinary Tanzanians who believed in democracy. The government denied these numbers, and the United Nations could only confirm at least 10 deaths.
Can you categorically say how many have been injured or have lost their lives over the last 3 days, Minister?
At the moment, nobody can state how many were injured, how many suffered, or how many properties were burnt. We are continuing to receive also the reports of the vandalized properties, private properties, including several regions of Tanzania. We are collecting that information. Some of the border posts, some of Tanzania Revenue Authorities, some of the police posts, some of public properties, public cars, some of TANESCO, which is our electricity supply company, cars were burnt. We are continuing to receive those reports. At the moment, nobody can accumulate all those numbers and say until all the data and figures are in place.
The UN is saying 10 people have lost their lives. Chadema says it could be up to 700.
Well, at the moment, I'm reading as you are reading, but let's wait for the right authorized information to be out.
But between those two figures, between 10 and 700, lies the shadow of a truth too dark to ignore. To understand how it came to this, we have to look back. When President Hassan took office in 2021 after the death of John Magufuli, she was seen as a breath of fresh air. Many hoped she would open up the political space Magufuli had tightly controlled. For a while, it seemed she might. But as time passed, that hope began to fade, replaced by growing fears that Tanzania was returning to the same pattern of repression it once escaped. Months before the election, the signs were already clear. The two main opposition candidates were banned from running. Tundu Lissu, one of Tanzania's most fearless voices for change, was arrested on charges of treason, a word governments often use when they can't handle criticism. Chadema, the largest opposition party, was disqualified after rejecting an electoral code they said was designed to silence them.
Whenever elections are held, the call or the aim is to have them dubbed as free and fair. There are numerous allegations that the 2025 elections were neither free nor fair, and one of them is cited on the fact that major opposition candidates were excluded. How do you respond to that?
No major candidate was excluded. The candidate who excluded themselves is by not signing the code of conduct for participating in the election, and this is as per the law. I, as a minister, also had to sign that code of conduct, Maadili. It's called Fomu ya Maadili. If you don't sign that, you cannot become a minister.
So when election day arrived, it wasn't really a contest, it was a coronation. And then came the silence. As votes were counted, the internet went dark. Social media access vanished. Foreign journalists were blocked, monitored, or removed entirely.
Okay, why was the internet shut down?
The internet, because internet, when we tried to open also, it created a havoc among small groups of vandalists who are creating problems in the vandalism. So they were using their main communication media was the internet.
Can you really say that this is a free and fair election when even communication itself is very difficult at this time?
We provided all the observers with alternative methods of communication in the country. So the communication with the observers is going on, and they are going also to stipulate and state that clearly in their report that they are communicating, and there were alternatives which were given for communication to flow and information exchange.
The problem with this internet shutdown is that it's hard to verify what's true and what's not true coming out of Tanzania.
When a government asks its people to trust the process while cutting off the lights, what else can citizens think except that something is being hidden? Because an information blackout isn't about security, it's about control. It isolates people, censors truth, and buries the evidence of what's really happening. In every corner of history, dictators have understood this well. When you shut down communication, you shut down accountability. Outside Tanzania, the reaction was little more than a whisper. A few statements of concern, a few polite words about democracy, and then silence. Why? Because Tanzania doesn't hold the kind of strategic importance that forces global powers to act. No oil reserves, no military base, no major leverage. But this story is bigger than geopolitics. It's about human lives, about freedom, and about what democracy means when no one is watching. Because what's unfolding in Tanzania isn't just about today's election. It's shaping how an entire generation will understand power. Children growing up in this moment are learning that elections might not matter, that speaking out might be dangerous, and that silence might be the only way to survive. For decades, Tanzania was seen as one of East Africa's most stable countries, a symbol of peace in a region often defined by political unrest. But stability without justice is just quiet oppression, and peace without freedom is only an illusion. On November 3rd, President Hassan was sworn in for a second term. The ceremony looked beautiful, flags waving, music playing, cameras flashing. But beyond the stage, the country was grieving. Behind every cheer was a whisper of fear, a deep sense that something precious had been lost. So what happens now? Once violence replaces dialogue and intimidation replaces debate, the road back to true democracy becomes long and uncertain. Real reform would mean admitting what went wrong, opening investigations, freeing political prisoners, allowing real opposition to exist again. But governments that hold power this tightly rarely loosen their grip willingly. Instead, the likely path ahead is silence enforced by fear, a country appearing calm on the surface but boiling quietly underneath. And that silence is dangerous, because anger buried alive never dies, it waits. Tanzania's struggle matters beyond its borders. Every time an election is stolen and the world looks away, another government somewhere else learns that it can do the same. Every unpunished abuse becomes a lesson in how to get away with it. That's why this story matters. That's why paying attention matters. Because the people of Tanzania deserve more than quiet suffering. They deserve leaders who listen, elections that count, and a world that refuses to ignore them. Now that you know, the question is, what will you do with that knowledge? If you want to keep uncovering stories that reveal the truth behind Africa's headlines, stories that most of the world overlooks, subscribe, share, and stay with us. Because the African story is still being written, and together, we can make sure it's told the way it deserves to be.